Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. A few weeks ago, a company contacted me named NKI, a company that quite frankly, I'd never heard of before. I would assume most of you probably haven't either, asking if I would be interested in giving their new line of CFexpress Type-B cards a try, because I shoot video using a Canon EOS R5, which has a CFexpress Type-B card slot in it, and this card is compatible with it, in addition to other Canon cameras, including the C300 Mark II, the C500 Mark II, and the 1DX Mark III. So they sent me over two 512GB cards, and I was really interested to give these cards a try because this card is somewhere between $200 and $250 cheaper, the 512GB card, compared to other 512GB CFexpress Type-B cards. You could almost buy two of these cards for the same price as a single 512GB card from somebody else. Now, if you landed on this video because you're Google searching NKI and you just want to know, like, are these cards legit? Are they any good? Do they actually work? Well, I'll cut to the chase and tell you that, at least in my experience over the past few weeks, I've been shooting 4K video, 8K video internally. I've been doing high-speed, continuous, raw shooting on the R5 as well to the NKI card, and I've had no trouble with it at all. Now, the one asterisk I just feel compelled to put on here is just to acknowledge the fact that NKI is not exactly a well-known, reputable household brand. I mean, they're new, and these cards are new. I mean, these cards have only been on the market for a few weeks now. I've only been using mine for a few weeks, and so far at least, I've had no trouble with it, but I haven't exactly been using it for 6 months to a year or 2 years. So they've yet to be fully tested and vetted, but so far at least, I mean, it looks good. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may recall earlier in this video, I mentioned that NKI sent me two of these 512GB cards and that I've been testing one of them in my R5. Well, the other one's still in the box. I've yet to open it, and I kept it in the box because my plan was to give it away. If you would like to win this card, if you would like to get a 512GB CFexpress Type-B card from NKI, absolutely free. All you have to do is open up the video description below, click on the URL that you will find down there, enter your email address, and then later I will go through, randomly pick an email, get in touch with you with shipping information, all that, and I'll ship it out to you. So while we're here together talking about CFexpress Type-B, why don't we talk for a moment about why the CFexpress Type-B card even exists in the R5? Why did they make the deliberate design and engineering decision of including a CFexpress Type-B slot and a single SD card slot when the R6 has two SD card slots? When this is so much nicer and better for the average user, especially when, with the ability to write to both cards, and it's also cheaper because SD card media is cheaper compared to CFexpress Type-B. So why did Canon put the CFexpress Type-B card in the camera? The first reason is because the R5 has higher resolution video modes compared to the R6. Now, the R6 is a perfectly capable 4K camera, but the 4K that this camera produces, the resolution and the compression settings that it uses, does not require a memory card that's any faster than a standard SD card. And that's why there's two SD card slots in the R6 and why it doesn't need CFexpress Type-B. Whereas the R5, as you probably know, because the R5's been out for a while, the R5 does more than 4K. The R5 is able to capture 8K IPB, 8K All-I, and now we have IPB Lite through a recent firmware upgrade, and 8K RAW, which is totally crazy to play around with. If you've never tried it before, it's almost like raw photography in that you can change the color temperature of your footage and post and all kinds of things. Really, really cool. And by the way, I think it's worth mentioning that in practical use, when I first got an R5, I did not plan on using 8K all that much. I thought I would mess around with it and experiment with it, but I didn't fully appreciate the practical application of it until I started creating 4K video and editing video on a 4K timeline and exporting 4K UHD video for YouTube. Because when you have 8K footage, it's twice the resolution. So you can punch in, you can upscale, you can rotate, you can do stabilization. You could do all kinds of things with that 8K footage that you can't do when you're shooting 1:1 4K UHD on a 4K UHD timeline, because otherwise you have to upscale everything. Whereas with 8K, it's all downscaled and you have lots of creative flexibility and latitude. It's kind of like editing a higher resolution image for, and then downscaling it. You get better quality and more creative freedom as part of that process. While we're talking about video, a couple of important points of clarification about shooting video on the R5 in case you don't already know. First being, 8K video has to be recorded internally on the R5. It cannot be, unfortunately, recorded externally, at least at the time of this video. So if you have an external HDMI monitor/recorder, something like what I'm using right now, which is an Atomos Ninja 5, this is what I use for all the videos on my channel. You can't record 8K to it because the R5 does not export anything higher than 4K high quality video, which is great for videos like this, but if you're recording 8K, you have to get a CFexpress Type-B card in order to take full advantage of that 8K resolution. By the way, just a quick side note, if you're interested to know more about using an Atomos Ninja 5 with the R5, I made an entire video about it, about why it's helpful, why it's useful, why I use it, and how to configure and set up the monitor for use with the R5, and I'll link to that video up here above. Second point, you don't have to go out and buy a CFexpress Type-B card in order to shoot video on the R5. Most of the video resolutions, as a matter of fact, are supported by just regular standard UHS-1 SD cards. Whatever SD cards you currently own will most likely work perfectly fine with most video modes on the camera. There is a limit though, there is a ceiling that you hit, and it's right at 4K 60 frames per second using all eye compression, which is a high quality 4K video mode on the camera, where the camera says, nope, you can't be using that SD card, you need a CFexpress Type-B, and you'll also run into the same limitation when you try to record in some of those higher resolution 8K modes as well. The second reason there's a CFexpress Type-B card slot in the EOS R5 is because of the camera's high-speed continuous shooting mode. This is that high-speed burst mode that news photographers, wildlife photographers, sports photographers, maybe even parents for that matter who have really active kids, anyone who just wants to hold the shutter down and fire off a ton of images. And the R5 is capable of 20 frames per second, which you're able to achieve when that high-speed icon on the back of the LCD display, when it turns green. And it turns green because it means your lens is compatible. It means you have a battery that is powerful enough and strong enough, an LPE6NH battery. It also needs enough of a charge in order to do it. There's other particulars there too about how you have to turn off Wi-Fi and all that. But when everything is good, and by the way, you can check the manual to learn more about this, when it turns green, then the camera is like locked and loaded. You can fire off a ton of images with the camera that way. And the thing to know about the difference between CFexpress Type-B and SD is that if you're shooting JPEG, well, there's not much of a difference between the two. When you're in that high-speed continuous shooting mode, you can use either one. The difference, however, comes when you're shooting RAW. If you are shooting RAW, the SD card is not fast enough to keep up with the buffer. The camera will just keep shooting and shooting and shooting, and it needs more time in order for that buffer to deplete, in order for it to save all of that data out to the card. And when you're shooting 45 megapixel RAW photos with the R5, just a standard SD card slot, or SD card's gonna be too slow. Even a UHS-2 card, it'll be okay, but it's not as fast as the results you'll get with CFexpress Type-B. So for some still photographers who use that high-speed continuous shooting mode all the time, like that is their thing, I mean, that's what they really use the camera for, then investing in CFexpress Type-B is a smart thing to do. When shopping for a new CFexpress Type-B card, whether it's through B&H, Amazon, Adorama, or anywhere else, you will find a variety of cards made by different companies with different capacities, different read speeds, different write speeds, and they're oftentimes sold at different prices as well. So, what's important and what's not? Well, let's begin by talking about capacity. When I first bought a CFexpress Type-B card with the R5, and I bought one because I wanted to experiment with the 8K video mode, I wanted to do the occasional bit of high-speed continuous shooting as well, I bought a 128GB card, because 128GB is what I would typically buy with an SD card, because I don't like to go too large with my SD cards. It's probably a topic for an entirely different video, but I thought that 128GB would do. But what I didn't really think about or fully appreciate at the time is that when you're shooting in that high-speed continuous mode, you are creating a ton of 45 megapixel raw images. I mean, it just eats up card space so quickly. And the same goes for video, especially when you're shooting 8K video, it eats the CFexpress Type-B card for breakfast. I mean, it just chews through this thing. As a matter of fact, I'll put some numbers up here on the screen for you so you can look at these. I mean, this is the maximum amount of footage that you can record to a 128GB CFexpress Type-B card in the 4K 60 All-I and the 8K modes. And as you can see in 8K RAW, it's like only 6 minutes of footage. I mean, that's barely anything. I typically use the All-I, so at least I get 12 minutes when I use it. But still, I mean, 12 minutes may seem like a lot of time, but it's really not. I mean, you burn through it so quickly. And just for comparison, a 512GB card like the one I've been talking about from NKI, it's 4 times larger, so your record times are 4 times longer. Here are the times for that. And as you can see in that new IPB light mode that Canon added through that firmware update to the R5 not that long ago, you can record over 3 hours of 8K footage to one CFexpress Type-B card. The other set of numbers you will see are the read-write speeds. Now, these quantify how quickly data can be recorded to the card by the camera and how quickly that same data can then be read from the card using a CFexpress Type-B card reader like this one when plugged into a PC or Mac. But in practical use, these numbers aren't particularly helpful because they are the maximum read-write speeds. It's analogous to the maximum speed of a car. Like if your car goes 120, how often do you really drive the car at 120, if ever, right? It's always something less. Well, a CFexpress Type-B is the same. Just because it supports a super fast write speed does not mean your camera is going to be writing data that quickly, and it definitely does not mean that your CFexpress Type-B card reader is going to read data that quickly either. Because there are so many variables. This is probably a topic for a different video, but it depends on the type of reader, the type of cable, the type of computer you have, all of that, how fast you're actually able to read data off of the card. It's always going to be less than what's published on the outside of it. The number that's actually more important, and unfortunately not everyone publishes or shares this information, is the continuous write speed. How quickly can data be written to the card? How quickly can the camera continuously just push data to the card without, say, dropping frames from your video? Because if frames were to be dropped, well, your footage could very well be ruined. If you check the specifications for the R5, you will see that it records 8K RAW video at 325 megabytes per second, but I guess just to be on the safe side, Canon recommends a card with a continuous write speed of at least 400 megabytes per second in order to keep up with the amount of data that the camera is pushing to the card to prevent frames from dropping when you are recording in 8K. Now, the good news with this NKI card is that this does support a continuous write speed of 400 megabytes per second, so it has no trouble keeping up with 8K RAW shooting on the R5. By the way, if you want to test this out for yourself, see how fast your card reader is, or test cards, whatever it is that you have, Blackmagic, the company that makes DaVinci Resolve, has a really awesome free utility you can download that you can test out your cards with, your hard drives with, whatever you have, and see what the actual continuous read-write speed is. And I'll put a link to that software down below so you can check it out. So if you'd like to win a free 512GB CFexpress Type-B card made by NKI, there's a link below in the video description you can follow to head over to my website, enter your email address to participate, and then later I will randomly pick one, and if you win, I'll ship it out to you. If you're interested in buying one of these NKI cards, there is a link below in the video description to the NKI store, plus a special 15% off coupon that you can use to save a little extra money. So that's it for this video, but one last thing I want to share with you, for those of you who've been following my channel for a while, who've been subscribing, asking questions, providing feedback, leaving comments, just really wonderful support that have helped grow this channel, help get it to where it is today. Just want to share with you that I am going to be finally hitting the road, fully vaccinated, ready to go. Going to be doing some traveling in July and August, and I'm going to be working on new landscape images, doing what it is that I love to do most. Going to be getting out and creating new work. Going to be creating some new video content from the road as well, which you will be seeing here on this channel. So if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, if you would like to keep in touch with me in the future and what comes next, then remember to subscribe by clicking or tapping the button below, and to also ring the bell down there if you would like to receive notifications whenever a new video is posted to this channel. If you learned something from this video, if you enjoyed it, please remember to give it a thumbs up. It really does help. That is it for me. I appreciate your time and attention. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week.